Today's episode is all about how to increase strength, speed, and hypertrophy of muscles. Professor Dr. Andy Galpin. So what are the essential components of an effective strength and hypertrophy protocol?
Okay, so what I would like to actually do is walk you through both of those, because as we mentioned before, they overlap, but the training needs to be differentiated so that you can optimize either strength, hypertrophy, or if you actually want, you can get a combination of both. This allows you to then get the adaptation you want, avoid ones you don't want, and then get it even a combination if that's the preference. So a lot of people will talk about, I want to get a little stronger, I want to add some muscle. That's a different answer than someone who wants to truly maximize muscle, which is a different answer from somebody who wants to maximize strength, which is a different answer from somebody who wants to maximize strength, but not actually gain muscle. So we have all these combinations. What's important to understand before we get into the details is a couple of things. Number one, we've been teasing this concept so far of the concepts are few, but the methods are many. And so I want to hit those concepts right now. These are, as you say, these are the non-negotiables that have to happen in any training program. And I'm referring to these in the strength and hypertrophy conversation, but these are true of power development, speed development, muscular endurance, any other thing. These are things that just have to happen for any training program to work. I mentioned one a little bit earlier, which was adherence. And so my frequent collaborator, Dan Garner, will constantly say, consistency beats intensity. Again, in fact, the literature will show you very clearly adherence is the number one predictor of physical fitness outcomes. So we want to do something that you will engage in, you'll put effort into, and you'll be able to repeat consistently over time. So that's number one. The second one is, and this is a major reason that people don't hit their fitness goals. In fact, I would argue, outside of not doing it, the number one mistake they make is progressive overload. So I'm going to walk you through exactly how much you should be increasing your sets and reps and weight, etc., per week, per month, later. But that's the biggest thing. You have got to have some sort of overload. The body works as an adaptation mechanism, right? So in fact, we talked previously about the Harvard Fatigue Lab. And one of the things actually people don't realize is the concept of homeostasis comes from research at the Harvard Fatigue Lab. It was work that they did on an endurance runner, I forget his name, and they sort of realized that after a long period of time working out, this is an acute exercise bout, the body actually comes back to some stable place, despite the fact he was continuing to work. And that's exactly what bore the phrase steady state. And that actually then they launched off and said, wow, there's this state that the body wants to be in, and we'll call this homeostasis. So those all concepts came out of exercise physiology, which is really, really cool, right? We don't get a lot of love a lot of times scientifically, but that's a good one that we took. So why that all matters is we have got to achieve some sort of overload without going excess. So we'll cover that later of exactly what to do, and we'll potentially get into overtraining and monitoring and managing things like that. But you have to have some sort of consistent, predictable overload. That's what's going to cause adaptation to continue to cause stress. If you don't do that, you can still do things like burn calories. You can still get some of the other benefits of exercise, like improved mood, cognitive function, etc. Flexibility increases. All those can happen without a progressive overload. But if you want to see these gains in strength and hypertrophy, you really need to progressively overload. So that's concept number two. The third one here is going to be individualization. And this is when we can get into things like personal preference, equipment availability. You have kettlebells or dumbbells, or you only have bands, or you have none of that. These are all smaller details, but that's an important component to it. The last one I really want to get into is picking the appropriate target. And we went through this when we talked about the fitness protocol. And if you run through something like that and you run some testing and figure out where your biggest limitations are, that's going to help you identify where you need to go. So if you can do all those things, you're going to be in a good spot to balance specificity and variation. All right. So if you want to make sure you grow your biceps, you better make sure your biceps are working. Having said that, if you over rely on specificity, you're going to increase the likelihood of overuse injuries, which is going to come back and actually hamper consistency over time. All right, so this is when hedging towards specificity is important, but too much can cause a problem. If you go the other direction and you go too much variation, so imagine you're just sort of doing all kinds of different exercises every time you work out. That's actually not enough stimuli directly on the muscle or muscle groups or movement pattern if you're wanting to learn a new movement to get you very far. And so this is a classic problem of I'm doing a lot of work, but I don't have a very clear direction. I lack specificity. So I'm working, but I'm not seeing a lot of improvements. And this is like in the business world, et cetera, this is like doing a whole bunch of different things means you get nothing really done. So that's the game we're going to play here, right? How do we overload this stuff? How do we make sure we're balancing specificity and variation? How do we make sure I want to do this? And then how do I individualize it for my needs and circumstances and movement restrictions and of time availability and my calendar and desires and all these things. So those are the concepts we absolutely have to hit. The methods that we choose run across a handful of variables, and we call these things modifiable variables because as you modify them or you make different choices within these variables, you get different outcomes or adaptations. This is exactly what determines the 9 adaptations that we've been talking about. So the way that I like to say this is exercises do not determine adaptation. So you can't simply go, I want to get stronger, therefore I'm going to choose these exercises. That's not how it works. What determines adaptation is the execution of the exercises. So deadlift is my favorite example. A deadlift is a common example that people think of when they want to choose a lower body strength exercise. But a deadlift will not increase your strength unless you're executing it in the proper fashion. I'm not only talking about technique here. I'm talking about these modifiable variables. The same thing for power exercises. We'll commonly see mistakes of doing activities like a box jump, which is great. People think, oh, I'm going to improve my power, which we know is extremely highly correlated to activities of daily living and particularly living unassisted as you age, right, is reduction in power. So they'll do an activity like a box jump. What they're failing to realize is unless you do it powerfully, you won't actually increase power. If you don't move fast, you won't get faster. So the way that we manipulate these variables is everything to determining the adaptation you get or, again, don't get. So with that foundation, I think we can kind of run right into these things and we can start off with perhaps speed and power. And what I would like to do is walk you through all those modifiable variables, what to do with them, and then hit you with as many different methodologies as we really have time for. And then we'll move on to strength and hypertrophy and kind of round the entire thing out. And then maybe at the end, we can talk some other variables like what happens if I have a training protocol and I'm halfway through it and I can't finish my workout. What should I do? Reduce my weight or reduce my duration or things like that. So there's lots of what if scenarios that we can go through that potentially a lot of people listening have questions about. So sound like a plan?
Sounds like a plan. I have listed number 1, skill and technique. Number 2, speed. Number 3, power, which is speed times force. Number 4, strength. Number 5, hypertrophy. Number 6, muscular endurance. Number 7, anaerobic capacity. Number 8, maximal aerobic capacity. And number 9, long duration steady state exercise.